Hello everyone, in this video I want to show you how to clean the cables on the throttle mechanism, or the throttle cables I suppose, on a motorcycle. So I'm using my Honda VFR 750. So on this one it has a double throttle cable, so there's two cables coming out here at the bottom and connecting up to the throttle body on the carburetor, which is down here. The first thing to do is just to test the actual functioning of the throttle. Okay, and when I pull on the throttle, I should feel that there is no resistance. It should be smooth the whole way, and I should feel a little bit of force pulling it back. So when I release the pressure, pulling the throttle back, it should naturally return to its original position. Okay, so that's a properly functioning throttle. And if I feel any resistance, it can be because dirt can get into the throttle cables and can kind of clog up the throttle cables and stop the smooth functioning of the throttle cables, which slide up and down the little throttle cable housing, which goes down via the cables. Okay, so the throttle is acted on with there's two little pieces of wire which are connected up inside to this throttle lever. So if those pieces of wire have bits of dirt and grit inside the cables, they're not going to go up and down smoothly. So what you can do from time to time is you can actually clean them. I would note that although you can clean them, if after cleaning the throttle cables with some throttle cable cleaner, or in my case I'm just using WD-40, okay, if you find that there is still resistance, or the function of the throttle is still not smooth, then you will have to replace the throttle cables. Or if you find that the throttle cables become stiff a couple of days later, then there's a good chance that you probably have to replace, or it's a sign that it's time to replace the throttle cables. The cables can become damaged inside over time, and no matter how much you clean them or grease them or lubricate them, they will still catch, because the inside of the throttle cable housing is just damaged from use. So this throttle cable is actually functioning perfectly. It's really smooth. And it springs back to its original position. So I have no problems with this throttle cable. So all I'm going to do is give it a light cleaning. Now what you can do is you can remove the throttle cables at the throttle body. It's a little bit of work, and it means that you can then free up the throttle cables where they connect onto the handlebar, and you can use a special tool to pump the cable cleaner in without creating much of a mess. I don't think you really need to do it, to be honest, particularly on this model of bike. I'm going to do it with the throttle cables. I'm not going to remove them. I'm going to leave them as they are. It could probably cause more problems than I will solve by removing them. So what I'm going to do is what I have done is you just remove the two screws. So there's two screws. They go in here. One of them's in here, I think. Okay, there's two screws holding on the switch. Okay, so there's two screws at the bottom. I removed them. They have a Phillips head. Not a Phillips head. I think that's the there's a particular Japanese standard screw. So you need a special screwdriver generally, so that you don't ruin the heads of these screws. But they weren't on too tight, so I was able to remove them with a Phillips head screwdriver. So I've removed those two screws. put them to the side, I don't want to lose them. They have little washers on the end of them as well, so make sure you don't lose the little washers. And then once you remove them, the lid of the switch opens up like so. It is still attached via this wire, so just don't yank or pull on it too much. Just want to move it out of the way a little. Okay, it's always going to try and fall back. And I'm taking a piece of paper and I'm putting our tissue just to collect any residual WD-40 that might come out. So I'm just going to stick it in here. Alright, I'm going to take my WD-40, give it a bit of a shake, and I'm just going to pour it in here. So here's the two cables, so you can see how they connect on. Let me just move it up and down just to demonstrate. So you can see the two cables, and they're connected in here and here. Okay, now you will not remove these two cables here. No matter how much you try, you will not. You will just damage the throttle lever if you try to take them out. You have to loosen the throttle cables down at the engine or the carburetor first of all. Okay. So there's the cables. So when you turn it back, it just pulls on this cable here, and this cable is the one that's connected at the bottom of the throttle body. Okay, so the throttle body is down here. It's connected into the carburetors. As you can see, when I act on the throttle lever at the right handlebar, just rotates the throttle body, and you can see the two cables. So the one at the bottom, as you can see here, when I act on the throttle at the right hand handlebar, it acts on the cable at the bottom. Let's try and get that into focus. So it acts on the cable at the bottom, which causes the throttle body to rotate clockwise. And then the wire at the top, it is there to return the throttle body. Now the throttle body is on spring mounted. You can see the spring there. So the spring is generally what returns it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour in some WD-40 in here, and I'm going to fill it up. Okay, so same here. Some of it will actually flow out here and be caught by the tissue, but a lot of it, if you just then rotate the throttle cable, you will find that it will make its way down through the throttle cable and out through at the bottom of the throttle body. So you want to make sure that you have a tissue down at the throttle body as well. So I can keep going with my pouring in my WD-40. I don't think I need to do too much here because these cables are actually quite clean and there is actually no problem. It all feels really, really nice and smooth. But if there is any light pieces of dirt, they will mainly make their way upwards actually on this model at the throttle body, because there isn't really much room for dust or dirt to get in here because the switch is kind of closed up, I suppose, so it stops dirt getting in. But there will be tiny little bits of dust over time will build up, so I can flow it in again, a little bit more here this side. Try not to get it all over the rest of the switch. Again, just work it up and down. Okay, so I go back to the cables at the end of the throttle body where they connect into the throttle body, and I should see the WD-40 flowing out, and it will bring the bits of dirt with it, and that should be my throttle cable nicely cleaned for hopefully another year. as long as I don't do too much mileage on it. But this should be part of your regular maintenance. I'm doing this when I have the tank off, so that I can get in and see down at the throttle body quite clearly. Okay. And that's how you clean the throttle cables. So I'll just give it one more dart. It'll help the WD-40 work its way down, but it will work its way down anyway, even without you turning the cable or the throttle. So once it's nice and clean, I will clean it all back up. Make sure it's clean my electrical contacts here. So the WD-40, the good thing about it is that if you leave it for a couple of hours, it will actually dry off. So any excess WD-40 will kind of evaporate, I suppose, into the air, and your throttle system will be left nice and dry inside the cable. With the WD-40, some of it will remain on the cables, only a slight bit, and it will help actually lubricate the cables slightly. But for the most part, that WD-40 will work its way down due to gravity. So it'll just go down through the cable, down out the opening at the throttle body, and it might drop onto the frame or onto the out onto the ground, or onto your, hopefully, your piece of paper, which you should have down there, and it will be nice and dry inside, mainly dry inside the cable. So the cable will not be filled up with WD-40, because it will just go the whole way down. So I'll leave that up to dry for a while, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and I'm going to grease the ends of the cables. So I'm going to use some multi-purpose grease, just a small amount, and I'm going to grease the ends of the cables, and that should that's part of the maintenance of the throttle system. Some people use cable lubricant. I'm not going to use any cable lubricant because it can be quite greasy and sticky, and it's going to remain in the throttle cables, and over time it's going to collect grease, or it's going to collect bits of dirt, and it's going to get congealed, turn into a congealed mess, and I just don't think it's really necessary. As I mentioned, if the throttle cables are in any way sticking, you are better off just replacing the throttle cables rather than trying to use cable lubricant as a sort of a crutch to get you over the problem that you have with your cables. Now, as I pump WD-40 in at the top, I should see the WD-40 coming out here. If I put in enough of it, I should see it flowing out here, which I can actually feel it here. So there's actually flow down through the wire, and it's coming out, and I can feel it on my fingertips. So that's why you would want to put a little piece of paper underneath here, just somewhere under here. You can see the WD-40 will just get all over the frame and the engine, so you don't want that. Let's put down a little piece of paper. So these cable ends were bone dry. There was no grease in them at all. So I'm just ideally what you should do is remove the cable ends, or remove the cable from the throttle lever, and be able to grease them up. But I'm actually just applying a little bit of multi-purpose grease using just a very fine screwdriver. Okay, and with it I'm able to work in the grease to where it should go. too much. Okay, you don't want it getting everywhere, but you want it getting in to the cable ends and keep them nice and greased. In theory, it's meant to reduce the risk of the cable snapping. So just a fine flathead screwdriver, that's all I'm using. Okay, and I'm just going to work it into the ends of the cable as well, underneath the cable. Just along the cable, not too much. Just at the lever point. And then, as you can see, it's now underneath the cable. It's all along the cable there. And then underneath here. Just along there. Remove any excess grease. You don't want it getting everywhere, making a mess. There's my cable ends greased, and I'm just going to do the exact same down at the cable ends at the throttle body. So here you can see my cable ends are nicely greased. And then the other thing I did that I didn't mention before is I've just got a little bit of a rag after all the WD-40 comes out here along the cables. It actually brings a bit of dirt with it. Any dirt that was in the up here inside the cables will come out with the WD-40. What you do is just take a little bit of a rag and just wipe down the cables all along here, okay? And the reason being, and this cable here as well, with a bit of a rag, and it just removes those little bits of dirt from the cable, and it means that they don't get pulled back up into the throttle cables. So you have nice clean throttle cables, and they're not going to be dragging dirt back up into the throttle cables. So that's it. You can see here on the floor I have a little bit of a wet patch. That's where all the WD-40 was kind of pouring out. So some of it missed the tissue that I had put down. So I can now just go and close this back up. Put down my screwdriver. And let's check. Yeah, I think it's all good. Take my screw. My screwdriver. Now we just need to put the last screw in here. tight. Okay. So there I have cleaned throttle cables, nice and free, and greased cable ends.